to the fat and give you our gut reactions on all things pop culture, film, TV and theatre. We talk the legends in the creative industry and those on the rise. We game old school. We do all of this, and a whole lot more. Like, subscribe, and get involved. Join Lance Dean, Anthony Nielsen, and the Outcast Creative.
Right, well, I've got a fantastic show lined up for you today. We are on limited time, 90 minutes sharp, so I'm gonna rock through some things. Before I bring on my fantastic guest, I'm just going to show you a couple of contrasting roles of his that you may not have seen. A trailer for one film, which I think is massively underrated, and if you haven't seen it, you should. And then we'll have a quick look at a scene from something else before I bring in my wonderful guest. So here we go.
Hey, a bunch of lebs beat some guy up.
Why'd they do that?
That's what happened yesterday.
Oh, the festival.
It wasn't a festival, it was a riot. Now, you be a good girl for Mummy, all right?
Where are you going?
Daddy's got to go beat up some wogs.
The day after the riots, and Sydney is a city on edge.
We need weapons.
What do you need weapons for?
Personal reasons.
We got to go out and patrol the streets.
That's the smartest thing I've heard anyone say all day. Jeez, Dad, I don't think we're going to go shoot anybody. Don't forget this. Your granddad's like a grenade. Bang!
These dogs are treating us like we're second-class citizens. I'm sick and I'm tired of them feeling like they've got more of a right to be here than us.
Why are they so angry in the world?
But they reckon the beach belongs to us.
It's a beach. It belongs to everyone.
Those ignorant dipshits aren't going to look at the world differently, Nick. That's how they are.
The fuck is that? Fucking gun. Where did you get it from? Antiques Roadshow?
I'm Vin Diesel.
It's like fucking Gallipoli. Except this time they're on our turf. Save this shit for the tail head!
This whole night has been a dumb idea. Now it's just suicide.
It's on!
Is that another killie?
Ned wouldn't stand for all these lebo cocks bringing their grease here from other countries.
The killer was Irish.
Right, now let's look at something completely different in the words of Monty Python. Just a short clip. Here we go. Further delay, let me bring in my wonderful guest, and I'll put my camera back on so we're not looking at a Klingon model ship. It's Damon Herriman, one of the best actors, character actors, if you like that term, I would say in the world, arguably, with a fantastic career over 3 decades in film and television. The versatility in this man is unparalleled. I've never seen someone, even maybe my friend Jason Fleming probably hasn't done as many quite wide-ranging and complex roles as you, and that is saying something because he's done a lot of films. It's an amazing career, Damon. Thank you so much for giving up your time and coming on the show. I really appreciate that.
Oh, my pleasure, Lance. Thanks for that very kind introduction. I might just call you every morning just for a pep up after that.
You can do that. You can do that because your morning will be my afternoon. So that'll be fine. That'll work for me. Well, look, I've got a lot to cover here, and you should see my notes. It's long, but I know you're on limited time, so we'll get on. I mean, one of the lines I loved from that movie, which I think honestly is something I'm going to quote it up. If we only fight battles, we're going to win. There'd be no point in getting up in the morning. That's a really, really big good line. I think to become a success in this industry, it is a bit of a battle. And I'd love to hear about some of yours. You grew up in Adelaide. You started acting from the age of 8. So you got into this quite young and you got nominated for some awards quite young. So do you think your cards were marked in the industry at an early age? Were you already on people's antennae in the industry quite early. Is that fair? Because it does seem like you've never stopped working.
Yeah, it's funny. It may seem that way. It's definitely not the case. I wasn't really on people's radar, except maybe as one of the kid actors. When I started at 8, from around the age of 10, I got my sort of first big professional job, which was the TV series The Sullivans, which actually played in the UK. So some of your older,
I remember it.
Yeah, right. Okay, so that was sort of my first major thing, and after that, I mean, when I was 10, there were like 3 other boys my age who were acting. So it was usually one of the 4 of us who got any job. So I then spent about 3 years doing a fairly solid amount of work at that age. And yeah, I wasn't famous by any stretch, but I was certainly one of the kids that was considered from that fairly small group. Then I got to high school and I sort of lost interest. I was a bit sort of put off by the fact that I suddenly didn't have one teacher. I had 8 teachers, and I was like, how can I have 8 teachers and then go onto a set and try and I just couldn't get my head around it. I think I was more self-conscious. When you're 10, you're not sort of thinking about what you're doing. You just learn the lines and rock up. When you're 13, 14, you start thinking about, well, how do I look? How do I seem? This is a bit embarrassing. I kind of lost interest and really only took it up again after high school when I didn't really know what else to do. And even then I was doing it as a side project to just working in an office with my dad. So, in terms of, being on anybody's radar, that probably started to happen a little bit in my 20s, but not to a great deal. And there were long stretches where I didn't work in my 20s and 30s. It's kind of weird. The period where I, it seemed like I didn't stop working, it's really only been the last 10, 12 years. Before that, I was having big gaps between jobs, to the extent that I probably, may have been one of those actors who gave up 15 years ago if it hadn't changed, because I wasn't really making enough money to live on. Let's put it that way.
I'm damn glad you didn't, because you would have deprived us of many a fine performance. Now, as I pre-warned you, I'm gonna throw some quick questions at you, just so we understand your relationship of growing up with films and TVs and what the things were that influenced you. So, what was the first film you saw on the big screen in the cinema?
From my memory, that was Mary Poppins, not the original release. I'm not quite that old, but it was. When I was about 5, it was for some reason re-released at the cinemas, and that's my first recollection of seeing a film on the big screen.
That was Gail Ann Hurd's answer to that question when she came on this channel.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Oh,
what was the last film you saw at the cinema?
I just saw one. I just saw Abigail about an hour ago.
With the vampire girl that's killing
the
lots
vampire
of
ballerina.
Okay. Yeah. Is there an actor? I mean, you've worked with some pretty big names, but is there an actor or actress that you've always wanted to work with that you haven't yet?
I would love to work with Anthony Hopkins, and I guess Meryl Streep would be my other pick there. Two kind of almost cliched answers because they're so regularly mentioned by other actors, but they're 2 of my favorites. That would be.
Let's put that mantra out there and hope it happens.
Yeah.
In the last 20 years, what would you say for you is a groundbreaking television series that you've seen, not one that you've been in, one that you've seen that you've gone, oh, wow, yeah, I'd like to do something like that?
I mean, again, a bit of a cliche, but that's easy for me. White Lotus. That was a show, both seasons of it, where I went, I would do it for free. It's like, this is an actor's dream. Everything about that show is an actor's dream.
That crazy guy who owned the hotel and had like the boyfriend on the side and all that stuff going on. I could have seen you playing that character.
Right. He's an Aussie. I mean, he's an incredible actor, that guy.
Do you have a film that's a guilty pleasure that you might whack on once in a while from time to time?
I suppose my guilty pleasure, although I haven't seen it for a while, I'm probably overdue, is probably The Sound of Music. I would think of as a guilty pleasure. I mean, I don't know if I have to feel guilty about it, to be honest. I think it's an excellent film, but it's not like, considered it's not Citizen Kane. But I've probably seen that film, since I was 6 or 7. I've probably seen it, 15 times. And if someone said they were popping it on again tonight, I'd be more than happy to sit there and watch it.
People are already saying, yeah, Freddie from Mr InBetween. Indeed, it absolutely is. This is a question I was going to ask you, but someone in the chat's put it. How is it playing Charlie Manson twice in 2 different genres? So for those people that don't know, Damon played Charles Manson in both Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which, by the way, is one of my favorite films of all time, definitely my favorite Quentin Tarantino film. And then you also played him in Mindhunter. Which of those did you film first?
I filmed Mindhunter first, I think. Goodness, they were so close together. I got Mindhunter first because that actually required so much makeup preparation. They actually cast that role 6 months before filming, which is very unusual for a guest role in American TV. You often get those roles in about 4 days, but because of that incredible makeup from Kazu, actually extraordinary. What he was able to do with my face. That had a big amount of lead up time. So the interesting story with that is that I had been researching and studying and watching and listening to Charles Manson for 6 months when I got an audition for Charles Manson in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So it was kind of a bizarre set of circumstances. Neither of those roles led to the other one. It was pure chance.
Right.
But it did lead to it in the sense that I, as in someone auditioning, had done so much research on Charles Manson in preparation for Mindhunter that probably the audition for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood came a little easier than would normally have been the case.
How many times did you have to get seen for that role? Because I had a friend who went up for a Tarantino film. She went up for a part in Kill Bill, and she must have gone in 5 times for it. I mean, this is pre-self-tapes, of course, but...
This was a self-tape. Would you believe it was only one? Again, maybe because I've just been spending so much time on Charles Manson for 6 months, or maybe they just didn't. I don't know. But it was also I was in Australia at the time, so there wasn't a possibility to do a callback in the room or anything. But yeah, just one tape, and then I flew to America to do the final makeup fitting for Mindhunter, which was shooting a couple of weeks later. And the day after landing, I got a call saying, "Oh, you got Once Upon a Time in Hollywood," which was at the time both a thrilling call and a disappointing call, because as far as I was concerned, I was going to have to say no, or they were going to have to say no. Someone was going to say no, because it didn't even cross my mind that they would cast the same person who was already doing it in another fairly high-profile production. So I was kind of like, wow, this is crazy. That's awesome news, but obviously you got to tell them I'm already doing it in David Fincher's show, and thankfully they did do that, and Quentin Tarantino was okay with it, so it all worked out.
He didn't mind.
No, in fact, I'm pretty sure they said he quite liked the idea of the kind of parallel universe. I think it helped that one was a 1969 Manson and one was a 1981 Manson in jail, and they were very different looks, very different sort of versions of him. So in a way, it kind of helped not to have different actors and the comparison of that with both of those things coming out at a similar time.
Did you get much direction on how to play the character in Once Upon a Time? I'm kind of interested in the atmosphere and preparation for a Tarantino set, really.
The atmosphere is amazing. The way I kind of described it to friends was it was so relaxed that it was like walking onto a set of mates making a short film. Like it did not have any of the feeling of we're really important people making something really important, and you better behave. And there was nothing intimidating about it. There was no time crunch. I mean, I really felt the benefit he has of time being, money being time, and the fact that he didn't have to worry about that. Nobody was rushing. It almost felt like
studio executive, like on set, pressurizing people. None of that.
None of that. I don't think he would. I don't think he would have that at all. So it was. I was expecting to turn up and be very nervous. There's Brad Pitt and Margot Robbie, and I didn't have any scenes with DiCaprio, but he's there at lunch one day. It's kind of like intimidating as a concept, but what was amazing was that it was not intimidating, and it was incredibly relaxing, and everyone was lovely. And Tarantino is a really lovely guy. He's you can ask him anything about anything, and he has a 10-minute sort of anecdote to tell you. And we had this chat about, it wasn't that long after I'd read something about him and Chris Nolan putting in the battle to save celluloid, because Kodak, I think, was not that lot far off shutting down their film factories, because not enough people were using film anymore. And that, I asked him that question, and then he went into this story about how, he and Chris Nolan kind of called up the studio heads, and I think he mentioned Spielberg and Scorsese and Paul Thomas Anderson, but it was mainly him and Chris Nolan, basically calling up studio heads saying, do you want your legacy to be as the person who saved film or the person who killed film? and got them to commit to buying enough film that would keep Kodak running for 10 years, enough film per year, regardless of whether they knew it would be used. But he said he'll be using it. Chris Nolan will be using it. Other directors will be using it. And if I think it was something like, if these 5 studios committed to that, to a year's worth of film for 10 years, Kodak would stay afloat, and it worked.
Fair enough. So, did you watch it Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? Because I know a lot of actors don't like to see their own work, but
I certainly did. I mean, there's no way I'm going to miss a Quentin Tarantino movie for a start.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. Look, I do actually. The older I get, the more I understand that thing of actors not watching their own work. I do watch it through my fingers sometimes, because it's, you can cringe at what you can, you ignore the bits you like of yourself, and you just take in all the bits you hate, and it can become very uncomfortable. But I still feel like I have to watch everything once, just so I know what's out there. I kind of want to know what it is. I feel like it's too weird to make something and then never watch it. But I definitely know people who do that.
So one of the things I want to talk to you about is, in my view, it's one of the best television drama shows ever made, and that's Mr InBetween. And I don't give that praise lightly, because I can be quite a critical guy, as anyone will tell you. But Scott Ryan, who plays the lead, Ray Shoesmith, and for anyone who hasn't seen it, it's basically about I guess, I mean, it's kind of wrong to call him a hitman, because he's not that specifically, but he's the guy you want on your side in a fight, kind of a low-level criminal, but he's also a dad, and the fact that he's a dad is a massive storyline. Slightly dysfunctional.
He certainly does do hits on people. It's certainly part of his his job.
But it would be wrong to say that it's just. I think if you're describing it and saying it's just a show about a hitman, I think that really undersells.
100%.
It's got a beautiful narrative. Every character, including yours, has a massive arc. So maybe tell us a bit about how you came to become involved, and the part you play for the benefit of people watching.
Yeah, well, so I play Freddie, who's this kind of greasy, sleazy nightclub owner, but he's sort of kind of harmless as well. I mean, not completely harmless. He does a lot of criminal stuff, but there's sort of a pathetic quality to him as well. But he hires Ray, the lead character, to work as essentially a security in his nightclub. But he also seems to be the guy that mostly gets Ray his criminal work. So he's the kind of middleman that gets Ray the cash to do the dirty deeds. It came about really because Nash Edgerton, the director of all 3 seasons, is an old friend who I've worked with many times over the years. And I think, he had suggested me to Scott, who plays Ray and wrote the entire series. I'd also met Scott before when he made his short film version of that character.
Yeah, I've seen that version.
Yeah, and I think Nash and I were at the same film festival where that played, and we were both like, wow, that guy couldn't even work it. Like that almost seemed like it really was a documentary, but people are dying in it, so it can't be. But that guy is so real, Anyway, so that's really how it came about. And I read it and I was like, oh yeah, this is fun. This will be cool. The scripts were excellent, but even reading it, and even as excellent as the scripts were, I had no idea what a kind of a little cult hit it would become. It really, I think it took all of us by surprise.
So, I mean, one of the things, I suppose I should have asked you this when we're talking about you playing Charles Manson, but the character here is obviously fictional, but I've met people like Freddie, I've met people like Ray as well.
I'm glad you're still with us, Lance.
Well, indeed. I'm just interested in the type of research or process that you take to each role as an actor. So Freddie's a fictional character, but in a very grounded, real show. You want the audience to believe this is a real person you could meet. And then in the same, you've also done, you've played things like the manager of In Excess in the In Excess a miniseries or docudrama biopic series. You've played a number of characters, big characters from real life. These are big iconic figures from history. If people delve into your CV, the clip we showed earlier, the character of Lance, great name for a character, of course. One of the biggest LGBT activists in Australian history. Do you have a different way of approaching a role like that as opposed to a role like Freddie, or is it much the same? Tell us a bit about that.
No, it's a great question. No, I do have a very different way. If a role is a real person, I try to do justice to the fact that was a real person and capture them as well as I can. I mean, if it's someone like Charles Manson, I don't feel I owe it to him, but I do feel like I owe it to the viewers who have seen enough Charles Manson interviews and video and film over the years to know what he looked, sounded, walked, seemed like. And I want them to, so I want to try and do it well enough that they get swept away and, it seems like it's really him. Certainly with something like Mindhunter, that incredible makeup did, I feel like at least half that job for me. It was amazing.
The transformation, I mean, Zach, your performance in that is just like outstanding. I've never seen a Manson as good as that. Never.
Oh, well, thank you. Look, I know it sounds like false modesty, but I really think when you get makeup which turns your face that much into somebody, especially when it's somebody a face we know, it does not only things for the audience, it does things for you as the actor. You look in the mirror and see that, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm him. Like I'm him today. It really gives you a sense of confidence in playing that character. Then with a character like Lance Garland from Riot, who's a real person, but not someone the audiences are generally going to know, I still want to get as much right about how he looked and sounded and spoke and behaved and all those things, just so that because his family and friends are probably going to watch it, and sure. I don't want them to go, that guy's nothing like Lance. I want them to go, wow, that captured something about him. So same with Chris Murphy, who was the manager of In Excess. That most people in the public didn't know him, but certainly people in the music industry did. And so I hung out with Chris a lot, to try and get familiar with how he behaved. With a character that's not a real character, so like Freddie from Mr InBetween, for me it's just I really just take it mostly from the script, and then of course you'll ask the director and perhaps the writer if there's anything else about the character that's not on the page. But if it's a well-written script, often it comes with a little character breakdown of their idea of how they see the character. Usually that's enough for me to go, okay, I can see who this is meant to be. And That's pretty much how it always is. There might be an accent, like the job I'm doing at the moment. I have to do a Boston American accent. That's something I hadn't done before, so that's something I had to take on. But I certainly didn't go, oh, I'm playing Freddie who owns a strip joint. I'm going to go hang out in a strip joint and see. I feel like, I've seen enough of the different characters that exist in the world, and I'm also a human being in the world. So the combination of those two things is usually enough for me to work out how to play someone.
If you're doing a Boston accent, I know what show you're doing with Kevin Bacon. It's the corrupt cop, isn't it? Is it City on the Hill?
No, it's a new Amazon show actually called The Bondsman.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Which was in the middle of filming, so that one hasn't come out yet.
Okay, I won't ask you too much.
But it is with Kevin Bacon, and he is an absolute gem. Lovely man.
Did you find out the answer to my Kevin Bacon story? You remember I asked you about that?
I did it. I've got to find out. That's right. Yes. You have to tell me
when you find out. If you find, we don't need to get into that now. But if you find out, just drop me an email because I'm dying to know.
Yes, I will.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard probably with him and Jason Fleming, who of course I've been lucky enough to work with several times. You hear people that have got a reputation for being incredibly nice, and if you really want to work with them, you really hope that that's true. I've never heard a bad word about Kevin Bacon ever.
No, and I doubt you ever would. He's a genuinely down to earth, nice guy.
That's good to know. So just going back to In Between for a minute, that ran for 3 seasons. You got a pretty decent arc in that, and when you're doing a show like that, I don't know how it would have been structured. I mean, in an ideal world, of course, all the scenes with Freddie in the nightclub shot over 3 days. All the scenes with Freddie in his house with his girlfriend shot over another 3 days the next week. But with Mr InBetween, was it jumping around a lot, or how did it work in terms of the shooting order for each season?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the seasons were all shot completely separately because I think they were at least a year apart each
year
time.
Apart, yeah.
But yeah, it was pretty much standard stuff. If we were going to be shooting at the nightclub, they would try and get, scenes for the nightclub in that day. I don't think we just stuck to a particular episode. I mean, there's such short episodes anyway on that show. They're like 24
They were
something.
That was my biggest gripe about the show, was it was too short.
Too short.
As soon as it was done, it was like,
I think it's partly why people love it also, even though it is a gripe. I think it's so quick and easy to watch that you can't get tired of it.
But there's no waste in it at all. There's no waste. There's not a single line of dialogue that doesn't give you something in that show, whether it adds character, adds story. I mean, I honestly can't praise that show enough. I've showed it to aspiring writers, and here's your character again. He does have a very nice range of designer shirt wear in the show. It has to be said.
Does.
Do you get to pick any of those out yourself?
I don't know if I did. I know I certainly didn't keep any of them. I didn't see any of those working for me in real life.
I can't think why. So going on to other roles that you've done. I mean, you played. Now this film, J. Edgar. This was directed by none other than Clint Eastwood, correct?
That's right.
And I mean, amazing. He's still chucking out a film a year. I think he's in his 90s now.
Yes, it's amazing.
I think that's the secret to long life, man. Just keep going. So if I'm right in thinking, I'm just trying to remember the name of the character. It was Hauptmann, the guy who kidnapped the Lindenberg baby. Yes, that's right. Another role they said, let's get that guy. He plays all the strange characters. We'll get him in. But great performance, very interesting film. You got to work with DiCaprio. Tell me about what it was like on a Clint Eastwood set.
Very quiet. I mean, it's kind of the stuff of folklore now, how quiet his sets are, and it really is true. Like, it's the most I said it was relaxing on Tarantino's set, but this is like going to the library quiet. Like there's no. I mean, he has a no shouting policy basically.
Right.
You know, it's not like they sit you down at the start and say no shouting, but I think the crew are told that, and you certainly get the sense when you're there that there's no tension, there's no shouting, there's no one getting up in arms about anything. It's all just very relaxed. And he gives very, very little direction. I rarely saw him give direction the whole time I worked on that. It's usually things like a little faster, something like that. But yeah, he was a real gentleman. It was, you know, I couldn't believe I was there. You know? It was one of the first jobs I'd done in America of any importance. I think I'd done Justified at that point, and maybe an episode of Breaking Bad. Other than that, this felt like a very big deal to me because I'd grown up watching Clint Eastwood and I couldn't quite believe I was working with him. But yeah, it was a wonderful experience. It felt like a true old school Hollywood movie, you know, and you know, working with Leonardo DiCaprio, which was also what, you know, you're pinching yourself every day.
How was he what you would call in the biz, I guess we'd call it a generous actor, where you're in a scene and they give you a lot? Because it strikes me from watching you and the very many varied performances, that's how you come across. You come across as a generous actor. I can see that the other actors you're getting the best out of them, and vice versa in the scenes with each other.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very, very, very kind. Yeah, he is, absolutely. I mean, it was a true joy to work with him, and he didn't have any airs and graces about him either. He was, you know, incredibly friendly. There were some, you know, as is often the case, there are some scenes a couple of other scenes we shot which aren't in the film. So, you know, there are probably the most I got to do in the film with a couple of scenes that aren't in the film, but they were with him, and yeah, that was you know, probably the highlight of my career to that point, I'd say.
What was it that enabled you to make the leap from Australian film and television over to stateside? Because I think it was Breaking Bad was kind of getting cast in, that was probably key. Was there something you got seen in that gave you more of an international stage, or something in your career that you felt pushed you into the bigger limelight, so to speak?
Yeah, it was a very clear. What happened? Basically, what happened was I got an American film that shot in Australia, a film called House of Wax, which was a horror film that Paris Hilton.
I've seen it. I've seen it. I've seen it.
About 20 years ago now. Goodness.
Yeah.
And I played one of the first of many kind of Southern rednecks in that. And I'm only in it for about 10 minutes, but because I knew that having an American credit was a much bigger, easier in for getting work in America than just having Australian credits, unless you have a big, you know, movie like Muriel's Wedding or one of those ones that really opens doors.
Yeah, sure.
You kind of need American credit. So when I did that film, I thought, okay, I think I was 33, 34. I'm like, I got to take this shot now and see if I can get an agent out of this. This may be the only American credit I ever have. So I went over for the premiere, and then when the premiere was happening, I got some meetings with some agents and managers, and that's kind of how it started. And then I would go back to the States and do these short trips. And after a couple of years, I think, I got an episode of a TV show called The Unit, which was written and directed by David Mamet, funnily enough.
Yeah, I was good. That's one of my questions, but you've segued nicely into it. So do carry on.
Yeah, well, which was I couldn't believe David Mamet, playwright and filmmaker, was the first person I was going to work with in America. But yeah, he happened to showrun this CBS TV series, and he didn't write or direct most of the episodes, but he wrote and directed this one, and that was my first American soil acting job.
Yeah, because you wouldn't think that, you know, David Mamet's going to pitch a show. What you got, David? Well, it's about special forces, and You know, you don't see him as kind of being the guy who's going to do a sort of Black Hawk Down television series.
Not at all. Not at all. No,
yeah.
it didn't seem at all like anything he'd done before. But yeah,
was it as a result of that you got the film Red Belt with him?
Yeah, it was actually. Yeah, it was. It was Red Belt, which is Chiwetel Ejiofor, wonderful British actor, is the lead in that. It's a film that has a kind of jiu-jitsu aspect to it. But yes, I got a very, very small role, but that role absolutely came out of working with him on the unit. And that was also one of my first roles in America too. It was sort of things like those jobs. And then I did an episode of Cold Case and an episode of a show called The Loop. It was lots of little guest roles mostly, or small roles like that one in Red Belt. I think the first thing of any kind of substance and size is certainly what it turned out to be was Justified. The FX series Justified.
People in the chat are loving these performances. Red Belt is a great movie. Benjamin wants to thank you so much for coming on the show, as do I. Do you ever get mistaken for the actor David Patrick Kelly from The Warriors? I can see that.
That's so funny. I have had that before. Yes, I have had that before. I don't think of any. I mean, he's probably 20 years older than me. Or maybe not 20. Actually, I don't want to age the guy up. I don't know how old he is, but he's definitely older than me.
He's getting on. He's getting on a bit. I think it's Warriors was 1978, so it's
right. Yes, I was 8 then. So, I would say that. Yes, I don't know if I've been mistaken for him, but I've certainly had several people over the years say, "Has anyone ever told you look like?" Yeah, that has happened.
So you obviously did. Tell us how the role in Justified came about, and talk me through the audition process of getting that part. Was it just a self-tape and you were in, or was there a bit more involved?
No, that was it. That was an in-room audition. That was back when they were still doing those.
Yeah.
And it was for a role in a pilot of a TV show called Justified. So there was no sense of this character. Well, firstly, no sense of the show necessarily going ahead, but no sense that the character was ever going to be in it again, even if the show did go ahead. So that was, another kind of Southern redneck type character. Interestingly, I never got those roles in Australia, but because I was sort of known, I guess, for playing more sweet, nice guy, boy next door type roles. What was great about coming to America was they didn't know me, so I could go for an audition like the one for Dewey Crowe in Justified, and sort of turn up looking a bit rednecky and talking a bit rednecky, and then they didn't have any preconceptions. So that was just an audition. Ended up getting that role. Shot the pilot in Pittsburgh, and then a few months later it was going again, and they wrote the character into the second episode, I'm pretty sure. And then he basically appeared sporadically over 5 of the 6 seasons. He was never a series regular character. It was never something I was contracted to, but I was always happy to go back to that show when they wanted me, because it was an amazing time. So much fun to play, working with people like Timothy Oliphant and Walton Goggins.
Yeah.
It was a real joy. And that definitely opened up doors for other things like Breaking Bad and J. Edgar and things that followed, because enough people in the industry saw that show to make a difference, I guess.
My friend RRTNZ asked on the character of Dewey Crowe, what was your approach to kind of making him a sympathetic character, despite him being a wannabe Nazi terrorist scumbag, as he's described him here? Was that all on the page, or did you inject any of that in yourself? What aspects of the character did you bring?
It's probably something I always try to bring a little bit to anything. So there's probably a bit of that. And then I think, there's this sort of to and fro that happens between actors and writers over time, where you write what they've written, and then they see what you do with it, and they see a little something extra. Usually there was something a little different from what they had maybe thought, and then if they like it, they sort of start going in that direction in their writing, and then you get the next scripts and they're like a bit more in that direction, and then you end up sort of forming a character. I mean, if you look at Dewey Crowe in the pilot versus Dewey Crowe later in the season, Dewey Crowe in the pilot is not quite the same guy, because I'm just going in there, I don't know, it's just like, oh, I'm the Southern redneck guy who says redneck stuff. He didn't quite have, he wasn't as well-rounded and well-formed, not because of the writing, just because I didn't know who he was yet. And he probably wasn't who he was yet, because we hadn't done him enough, but then he kind of became this sort of hapless, yapping little, puppy dog kind of character who thought he had sort of a bigger bark than he really did, and that kind of became his thing, and they wrote to that, and so I guess it was a thing that just it kind of happened over time.
I remember the scene where you get deputized. You're kind of hitching along the road, and he pulls up to give you a lift, and you're like, "Oh Christ, no, thanks, mate. I'll wait for the next person to come on." I thought that scene was a lot of fun.
Yeah. There were so many incredible scenes that in that show. It was just it was a gift.
I mean, you've got so many credits. Honestly, man, I could talk to you for hours about this, but I know we haven't got that kind of time, sadly. Recent stuff, been The Artful Dodger, of course, the new TV show. Again, you played a real character in the Thai cave rescue. Is that, do you get more of a kick out of doing a project where you think, actually, this is quite important, over more just your comedy drama? I'm not talking about social messaging necessarily in a piece, but if you're doing something about a pivotal moment in history, or you're something that's perhaps more likely to get an emotional response from the audience. The Thai cave rescue, for example, was a really big event. Everybody was covering it all over the world, and I think we got two different movies and two different miniseries about it that all kind of seemed to drop at the same time.
Yeah.
And the one you were in was very good. Tell me about your thinking on that.
I mean, yeah, definitely. If you're, something like Riot, which was the story about the Sydney Mardi Gras coming to be, and something like the Thai Cave Rescue, which is the story of that incredible rescue of that soccer team. Anything like that, you do get invested in a different way, because it is a true story, and you learn so much more about it than you ever knew before. And you absolutely want it to be presented in a way that is going to do justice to those people who did whatever the story happens to be representing or celebrating or whatever. So I don't know if that's something I would necessarily choose one job for that reason, but certainly those jobs are very rewarding in a way that just a fun kind of made up story is probably never going to have the same emotional impact on you.
Sure. Is it fair to say now that because it seems to me like you never stop working now, like you said, in the last 10 to 12 years, are you in a position now where you can pick and choose what you want to do, as opposed to thinking, I've got to put my kids through college next year, or, I need to fix that crack in the pool?
I suppose so. I suppose so. I mean, there's but I probably was also quite picky and choosy, even when I wasn't in a position to be, not out of any kind of snobbery or anything, but just because, a couple of reasons. One, because it's just more enjoyable to do things you like. It can be quite depressing as an actor to be on a set where you don't like the role or you don't like the writing.
Indeed.
But also, I think, if you can afford to do that and choose things that you like, you're ultimately going to be better in them, and that's ultimately going to lead to more work. So it's sort of a false economy sometimes to just take every job that comes along. But I also absolutely get that at times you just have to, because people have bills to pay, and I've certainly been in that position too.
I mean, there's some shows that you've been in that they're really strong that I don't think a lot of people have seen. A lot of people are finding Mr InBetween now, which is really good. One that a lot of people probably haven't seen, might not have heard of, is Perpetual Grace Limited.
Yeah.
This is a fantastic show, really original plot, and you play the son of the religious figure, if I remember rightly, who's got ambitions to be a magician. It's a while ago since I saw it, but
right. Yes, that's right. Ben Kingsley and Jackie Weaver played my parents, although I never had a scene with them, as it turned out. That's just the way the story was. He was kind of estranged from them. And I worked with another. The lead actor really was Jimmy Simpson, a brilliant, lovely American actor who I'm sure if people look him up, they'll know his face. He's been in a million things. Yeah, that was and yes, my character was kind of this quite sweet, simple guy who was obsessed with magic, and the show had a certain magic to it as well. So, my character would do a magic trick where he would literally throw down a puff of smoke and then appear way too far away than you could possibly have done.
That's right.
Magic trick. And it was a beautifully shot, beautifully made show. But yeah, as you say, not many people have seen that one. And that's just one of those things that happens sometimes.
Did it not get a second season because of the pandemic? I wondered if it was a show that because it came out in 2019, and I wondered if season 2 came a cropper because of 2020.
I think it was really just one of those things where not enough people found it. It was on one of the streaming platforms, which wasn't as, didn't have as many users. I can't even remember the platform now, actually. It's terrible. But it was, anyway.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, it was just one of those things where I don't think it got enough people watching, and that happens. But it was a great show. I was really, I would have happily done that for years.
Another show that you did that a friend of mine had a pretty big part in was the TV show Quarry.
Yeah, right. Who was your friend?
Nikki Amuka Bird.
She's amazing and such a lovely person.
Really, she's a really, really good egg, very warm. And again, I would also say she's another actor who's very generous in scenes.
100%.
Wants the best out of the people she's working with and wants to give you her best. And that was another show that started off well. I felt like it dipped a bit in the middle, but it still was a good show. But again, I don't think it got past season 1. If it did, I haven't seen season 2 yet. I've seen all of season 1.
No, it didn't. No. If you go through all the shows I've done, played a series regular in, Lance, you'll find most of them don't go past their first season. I don't know why, if there's a curse there.
Is that called the Damon Herriman curse? For any producer, don't ignore that. It's not real. But you play a gay, because you played a gay hitman in that. You played a gay hitman in I think it's a repressed gay hitman, if I remember right.
Yeah, well, it was set in 1972 in Memphis, wasn't it? I think it was in Memphis, 1972. So yeah, he was certainly very repressed, lived with his mum, incredibly violent, tough guy, but also a real softie. And that was an amazing character. He was. That rarely come along. It was so brilliantly written and directed, and the other actors were amazing. It was beautifully shot. That really felt like, especially it was produced by HBO, but it screened on Cinemax, which is their other channel, and it felt like it was always on the wrong channel. It should have been on HBO, and I think it would have got a lot more eyes on it.
Did you do anything in particular to prepare for your role in Flesh and Bone, playing a homeless guy? Like, I mean, I just wondered if you might do the literal thing of spending a night out on the street to see what that's actually like.
It did cross my mind. I'd love to say I did that, but I didn't. But I did certainly start observing people who were living on the street in a way that I hadn't before. That was another one that went one series, Lance. We're really we're going through them all.
Sorry, mate, but these are all good shows that I want to bring to people's attention.
I totally agree. I mean, Flesh and Bones are an absolute ripper. For people who haven't seen it, which is going to be all of you, it's about a ballet company in New York, and it's shot in Manhattan. It looks great. The locations are great. And I played this homeless guy who lived under the stoop of a block of apartments that the main ballet dancer lived in, and he became kind of protectively obsessed about her, about looking after her. It was a great. It was always a dream to work in New York one day, and I couldn't believe that actually came true.
Have you ever done any theatre, Damon?
I have, yes, done quite a bit of theatre over the years. Nothing super recently, but done, I don't know, maybe a dozen professional plays over the years.
There you are in Flesh and Bone. And actually, you do look like David Patrick Kelly in that shot, I have to say. look a bit like him from the Warriors. So what would you say is different in terms of the discipline for acting on stage as opposed to, I mean, are you somebody who likes to have a bit of rehearsal for film and television stuff, or because often these days you don't get it, do you? You're just turning up on set and might have a couple of words with the director, but a bit of blocking, but it's not like you get to spend an hour in a room talking character and working through the scene.
I've asked myself that question a lot, because I don't know if I've quite come to an answer, but I think probably what I like, my preference is, if there's going to be rehearsal for film and TV, if possible, that you do it before the day, so that you know roughly where you're moving, and that you've gone through the words, and you know what you're saying and what you mean when you're saying it, and that it all works. I quite like doing as little rehearsal on the day as possible, because I feel like the freshest takes are the earliest ones. The ones that feel the most spontaneous. I will often say, can we shoot the rehearsal literally the first time we're doing the scene on the day? Say, can we just, especially if it's like, you're sitting across from someone in a restaurant and the camera's set up, and they're like, we're going to rehearse. I'm like, well, we could just film the rehearsal, because it's the first time I'm going to say it. It's probably never going to feel as fresh as this again. So I that's probably what I prefer with that. Obviously with theatre, you have to rehearse. That's be very difficult to put on a play without having rehearsed it. And it's a very different beast in that respect. Other than that, I don't, I guess there are technical things, like you need to be louder when you're doing theatre, but I don't, and I guess gesturally, you're probably inclined to make bigger gestures, on stage than you would on screen, because a camera, if a camera's here, you really only have to think about something and your eyes will tell the story. Someone in the back row of a theatre is not going to get that opportunity. So you do have to do a little more, but I like to think that there's not too much more you need to do other than being louder so they can hear you.
What's the best note you've ever been given by a director that's been the most useful for you as an actor? And I'm taking notes here. So
well, it was probably something early on. I mean, I don't remember this specifically, but I'm sure this would have been the case of doing less. Like, I think that's the especially with acting. Like, I think people, and I certainly was guilty of this when I was younger, thinking, oh, if there's a section where the camera's on me and the other person's talking for 45 seconds, I can't do nothing, because I better do some faces, I better react. But if I sit opposite you and you talk for 45 seconds, I may do nothing with my face because I'm listening to you. So now I think what I've probably learned over the years is that listening, really listening, is interesting to watch in itself. You don't have to think, oh well, I better do some faces for the camera. Now, that's not to say that if I had a camera on me for 45 seconds, I would sit there like a statue and do nothing. But I also am quite aware that, that what's going to feel truthful and believable and therefore watchable is you really taking in what they're saying. You don't have to be conscious of being interesting. It'll be interesting if you look interested.
Mm. Did you find big name directors? I've got my own view on this, but I'm interested to hear what you say. Like Eastwood and Tarantino, did you find that on the whole, although there might be extensive discussion about your character and stuff before you get to set and whatnot, on the whole, once on set, their direction is fairly minimal?
Well, those two, absolutely. I mean, Clint Eastwood, I think maybe gave me one direction the whole sort of 4 or 5 days I was on that film. I was on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood for 4 days. There are a couple of scenes that aren't in the film that are on the deleted scenes of the DVD.
I've got the Blu-ray. Yeah.
Oh, you've got them. Okay, yeah. Well, they're fun,
Blu-ray.
especially the one out there, the back guest house scene is great, which is great, beautifully written scene. Yeah, he didn't give a lot either. No, you're right. I mean, he Tarantino felt more like he was just playing really, and sort of see, he would think of things on the fly. So he would say things like,
let's try this.
Let's just try this. He'd get an idea between takes. So it often wasn't the direction often wasn't, you didn't do that how I want to do it more like this. It was, although there was that too, but it was more likely to be that he'd come up with an idea or a line even. Like there's in that deleted scene at the guest house that you've seen, there's a moment, in this scene, I'm trying to encourage the guy who I know who manages rock stars. I'm trying to encourage him to kind of listen to my music and take me on as a rock star. And when I find out that there's no way of getting in touch with Terry Melcher, who normally lives in the main house, a big music producer, he said, when you find out that he's out of town, why don't you say fuck a duck? I was like, sorry, what? He's like, yeah, why don't you say when he says he's definitely not going to be here, just look frustrated and say, well, fuck a duck. Like, okay, Quentin, I'll say fuck a duck. And so in that scene, the deleted scene, that's in there, and it works. It works. It's very funny. It's so
I remember it.
But
I mean, you're an actor that I would describe as a chameleon. And especially with the Manson in Mindhunter, that's, I mean, as you say, 50% of it's the makeup, but you are a chameleon because you've done so many different roles, so many different accents, different types of characters. Let's look at accents for a second, because you just slipped into American there like it was second nature to you. Mind you, I know so many actors that like doing their Tarantino impressions. Heard a lot of those on set. But did you ever have an accent coach? Like before you went to the States, did you think, right, I want to brush up on a few American accents. I want to be able to do Southern California, New York. Let me get an accent coach. Or is it just something you applied yourself? Tell us a bit about that.
A bit of both. I think with House of Wax in Australia, they had a dialect coach on set for every Australian doing an American accent. So that's where I probably got that accent in my head. And then I kind of used that for things like Justified and other Southern accents from then on. An American accent, I'd always sort of had a crack at doing. I'd done plays that were set in America. So I had a fairly decent idea of how to do a standard American accent. But I think also just picked that up from spending time in America. And with things that are specific accents, I definitely would always use a dialect coach. So when I've had to play an Irish character or, this Boston accent that I'm doing right now, I had to do an Icelandic accent for a guest role once. So things like that, I would never try and just pull that off without getting someone to run me through it a few times.
Sure. What are the sort of noticeable differences, would you say, between shooting stuff in the States and shooting stuff Australia side? And do you have a preference?
I don't have a preference, actually. I think the preference is for the project that's good, and that happens in both places. The differences are less obvious than I would have expected before I came over here to America. I'm here at the moment. It's more just things like you see there are more people on the crew. There's more money on the production.
Yeah,
there are more vehicles, more trailers, more food. I mean, my goodness, there's a lot of food on the American productions.
The craft services is pretty top notch.
There was just, you will never go hungry on an American set.
No.
Having said that, the food on the Australian sets is generally amazing. It's just not everywhere all the time.
No. No.
Other than that, it's pretty much the same. They use a couple of different terms for things. But other than that, it's surprisingly similar.
Work ethic, much the same, all that kind of thing.
It really is. I think crews feel like they come from the same DNA. They really do feel. There might be in America, I guess there's probably more of a hierarchy with actors that you don't get in Australia. I mean, you get it a little bit if there's a famous Australian actor working on something, you certainly get, everyone can feel that, but it's not like, it feels a little less hierarchical. Is that?
Yeah.
Than it would over here, where there's you certainly, if you're on a film with big movie stars, they're treated incredibly well, and you definitely notice that. You're just less likely to see that back at home.
Do you have a preference of type of role, or is it just all about the script at the end of the day? Because you've done your fair shake of bad guys and villains and hitmen, It's so nice to see Riot, where you played the character in Riot, was so far removed from anything else I'd seen.
Right, yeah, and that's a huge appeal to me. Is something I haven't done before. So if a role comes up that I feel like, oh, I've never played someone like this, that is incredibly enticing. But that would still have to be something that's in a well-written script. So the script is paramount, really. Like, it's very hard to make a bad script good. And even if it's a great role, even if it's a good director, even if it's with good actors, if the script is bad, it's any one of those factors, really. If any one of those factors is bad, it's hard to make it work. But I certainly did a lot of, around the time I'd done Manson twice, I certainly took a break there for a while from playing truly horrible, violent people, because I'd played about 5 years of that. Almost creepy types. Yeah. There was Judy and Punch, where I was beating up my wife. There was The Nightingale, where I was like horrible.
I've seen that film. That's a mental film, Judy and Punch. It's
a good one. Hey,
yeah.
Mirror Folks, Australian writer director.
That was an independent movie, right? If I remember rightly.
I think so. There was a connection to, I know Vice. It was partly funded and produced by Vice in America, but I can't remember who else was involved financially.
I mean, do you think we're going to see? Because I wanted to ask you about the changes you've seen, because you've been in the industry a fair old time. Starting, 1990 was The Big Steal, which of course is a favourite film of mine. Daniel the Lion Tamer or Daniel Our Son, and I owned that on VHS.
Roles,
mate, that's the first film I saw you in, and I remember following the careers of all the actors in that film, the young actors, because I thought they were all really good. So
right,
that's what connected me to you, which is quite strange because it's so far back. But
now, goodness,
yeah. So we're in 2024 now. So some 34 years. There's been quite a few changes in the industry over then. Some of them are weird things, like, characters always used to be in block capitals everywhere in a script. Now they're only in block capitals the first time they arrive.
Right, that's so true.
Whereas before they were always in, which personally I prefer. Right. And then, then we have other bigger things like intimacy coordinators and how that's changed and stuff like that. What sort of changes have you seen that you think are either for better or worse in the industry over that time? Anything in particular that strikes you at all?
It's an interesting one, because these things tend to happen so slowly. I feel a bit like the frog boiling in the pot and not realizing they're being boiled alive, because you sort of don't notice these things as they're happening. But I guess, certainly intimacy coordinators is something that's changed a lot. And I haven't played many characters who are intimate with anyone, so I haven't had to deal with too many of them anyway. Because
are you usually the person that kills people, or
that's right? That's right. I guess the biggest change that I've noticed, things very rarely being shot on film now. That's certainly something that's changed.
Sure.
But the fact that things shot, we used to say, oh, it's not shot on video, is it? Oh, it's going to look horrible. That's not the case anymore. Things, digital video is beautiful now, and it's amazing what they can do with those cameras.
You can see rushes immediately.
You can see rushes immediately. We were doing this show a couple of days ago, and not only were they seeing what was shot immediately, they edited the scene immediately. Now, obviously not the final edit, but we finished shooting a scene, and then the director said, and I was about to walk off, and he said, come and have a look at this. He played the scene back, fully edited. I was mind blown. I'd never seen that before. Because there's just a guy there going, well, just that, there's the scene. He just wanted to see that he had everything he needed, and the easiest way to do it was to edit the scene on the spot. But look, nothing else is particularly coming to mind. A lot of things have stayed the same, for all the changes that have happened. But I guess that, it's less about what it's like to be on a set and more just the industry, so things like streamers coming in and how that's changed, and how making movies now is not necessarily something that's being made to ever be played in a cinema. It might be, there are a lot of movies now that are made to be played on TV, which used to only happen.
How do you feel about that personally, as somebody who grew up in the industry? Yeah, but would you always prefer to see it on the big screen?
I think so. I think there's nothing like the magic and romance of going into a dark cinema and watching a movie. And hopefully that's something that doesn't go away. I know we all thought it might go away over COVID and never come back. It has come back, partly due to Barbenheimer, I suppose. But I would be a travesty for that to ever go away. It's such an experience of life. I can't even imagine what it would be like to not have that option. But
you're a bit of a cinema goer yourself, then. I'm getting a sense of, you enjoy going to see movies.
I do. I'm not like someone who goes like every week, although I've tended to go more. If I'm on a job away from home, it's probably something I do more than I normally do, because it's it's something to do when you're away.
If you're in America, you've got a day off, you can go to a multiplex and they've got 6 or 8 screens. There's probably
so many things on here. Yeah, there's so many films here that you see trailers for. You think, well, that we're probably not going to get half of those in Australia,
Yeah. In terms of like independent films and stuff like that, do you ever develop your own projects? Is that something you're looking to do in the future as you kind of get more clout? Because you're an actor with some clout now, I would say. Are you going to do that, develop your own stuff, or is that like, no, I'm quite happy just to turn up on set and like,
I'm not maybe sure I do have that much clout, Lance, but can you please spread that rumor? That would be quite handy for me.
I'm doing it already. Don't worry about that. I don't have ambition to direct.
Look, I'm not opposed to the idea. I've directed shorts before, and I enjoyed the creative aspects. I found it a little stressful. It's a lot of as you would know, the compromise.
Yeah.
Really got me. The amount of compromise really got me. I was like, I just want it to be the way I want it to be, and compromise. Very frustrating. But writing, I definitely have an interest in, and I've written some shorts that have been made. I've written some features that haven't been made or haven't finished yet. But I still very much have an interest in that side of things. So at the very least, I would love at some point to get something I wrote, a feature that I wrote up and made. But easier said than done. We'll see.
No, well, that's fair enough. If you ever are developing anything like that and you want to push it, come to us on this channel and we will be happily at your beck and call to do all the PR we can.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I will hold you to that. Thank you.
You can. You absolutely can. I'm just gonna look to see if there's any other questions in the chat that I've missed, because I'm conscious of the time, and I know you're due Kevin Bacon's trailer for dinner soon. So my good friend Stepenzo always likes to ask my guests questions about food, and here it is. What are Damon's thoughts on Mexican food, and what would he order at a Mexican restaurant? Well, you're kind of in that position now.
That is so funny. I am going to a Mexican restaurant after this interview.
That's nuts. Hilarious. What are you going to order?
Now I feel under pressure. I haven't even got the menu. I would probably be inclined to either get, I know they have really good tacos at this place, so I probably would be inclined to get tacos. Otherwise, maybe a burrito or maybe an enchilada. I haven't had an enchilada for a while. Definitely a margarita, though. Definitely a spicy margarita.
Mate, you're in the right place.
I can't believe. I feel like you're that guy has ESP.
I mean, Stepenzo often co-hosts things with me, and he's an incredibly insightful individual. So, right. I mean, that would not surprise me in the slightest. Somebody else asked me something else a bit further down. Are you looking at, well, I guess it just depends if you've got anything lined up. Any more plans for any more comedic roles? You do have a really good talent for comedy, it has to be said. Thanks,
I love doing comedy. I absolutely love it. And I haven't done as much as I would like. I'm doing a film, hopefully in Australia in a few months, that is a comedy, which I'm very excited about. I'm just trying to think if there's any comedy stuff that's about, I mean, look, the thing I'm doing at the moment isn't a comedy, but it has comedy in it. And that's, I would say that about Mr InBetween too. That's almost a comedy. It's got so many laughs in it. When you got scenes like
that's
Freddie,
so good about,
arguing
that
over
show
paper.
That show hits so many of the right buttons. It's got the perfect blend of comedy, natural drama, a bit of romance, but everything that's in real life, basically. Mm-hmm. You really feel like real.
Yeah, completely agree with you.
If they I mean, I'd love to see them do a Mr InBetween feature film. If they decided to do one and they asked you to come back, would you be there?
Oh my God, with bells on. Not. They wouldn't have to ask twice.
So I really think that could be a good movie. I really think it could.
I haven't spoken to Scott in a while, Scott Ryan, who writes it all. But every time I ever see him, I'm like, "Are you writing that movie? You got to do it," because people want more. And I think having the scope and budget of a feature film to make it a bigger thing, with him as a lead character, one of the most watchable characters ever to be on screen, I think is such a good idea. And I really hope he does it. I really do.
Well, I'll buy a ticket. I'll co-write it with him if he needs a co-writer. I want to get him on. If I can get him on this show, I would love to have him on. So next time you speak,
put in a word. He's a hard man to track down. I think he lives in a caravan out in the desert or something. He's
surrounded by a minefield with a sniper rifle. And the Gourd King is a good buddy of mine, possibly rumored to be actor Michael Cera. I can neither confirm nor deny. Just wanted to drop by and say hello to Lance and Mr Herriman. Loved you in Justified.
Thank you.
Got a lot of fans here, man. A question from Gooch Diabolical Souls, runs another channel, does a lot of interviews as well. Do you feel the antagonist villain roles are something you'd like to try more of? Do you feel these roles are more open to develop? That's a good question.
I mean, I feel like I've done a lot of the villain roles.
And he's asked that question because you really sink your teeth into those roles.
Oh, right, right. I do. Look, they're the most fun. They are the most fun. And I'm sort of playing the antagonist villain in this show right now. But it's not like a grossly violent character or anything like some of the other ones I've played. He's more of like a fun villain. They're definitely a lot of fun to play. So I can't imagine a point of ever going, oh, I don't want to play villains anymore. But there was one point where around that sort of run of bad guys that I'd played, where someone said to me, you're kind of the go-to guy for villains now. And I thought, I mean, I know they were sort of saying that as a nice thing, but I thought, I don't really want to be the go-to guy for anything,
Yeah.
So that really kind of hit me, and I thought, okay, I'm going to have to actually actively not play villains for a couple of years, just so, not that anybody's particularly out there talking about me and my career, but I just didn't want that to ever be a thing of like, that's just sort of the thing you get that guy for, And I thought, well, even just for my own enjoyment, I thought, you know what, I like variety, and I just made an active decision to not do those types of roles for a while.
I think if anybody looks across the breadth and depth of your career, they'll see that you can pretty much turn your hand to anything somebody puts in front of you, as long as the script is good. Because at the end of the day, that's what you want to do, isn't it? Just to wrap up, and a couple of these tie into things I was going to ask. Is there a role that you'd like to try and play, maybe on an iconic IP, like, for example, on a Star Trek series, or one of those kind of iconic shows, or maybe it's that you want to do Hamlet, a big iconic role that you want to do that you haven't ticked that box yet?
There's nothing really that comes to mind in that regard. I mean, of course, being on a Star Trek or something would be amazing, and it'd be a lot of fun. Something like Doctor Who, I grew up watching religiously, so something like that would be a lot of fun. Someone just asked, "What's my dream project?" So I had this idea recently. I don't think I've ever done a biopic of Bob Hope, and I at certain angles, I kind of catch myself and go, I think I could kind of be made to look like Bob Hope without too much trouble. And I don't think they've ever done the Bob Hope biopic. So I'm just putting that.
That could be a really interesting film. You and I should talk about that. Because
there you go.
That's a person I know quite a bit about as well.
Interesting.
That's really interesting. One of the films you've got coming out, I was really surprised to read about this. It's the first time I'd learned about this is today. Is you're in the Robbie Williams biopic, and I think are you playing Nigel? Is that his manager?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
So second time you're doing band manager.
It is. It is.
Did you do a Reese Darby and go band meeting? Robbie present. With the tape.
We did it, but that I do love him.
He is great, isn't he, Reese Darby?
He's brilliant. Good. Yeah, the Robbie Williams biopic, it's called Better Man. It's been made by a brilliant Australian director called Michael Gracie, and I believe it's coming out at the end of this year. It's going to be quite spectacular, I think. Every day on set, I had my mind blown from it's just huge. It's a big old school musical where people do break into song and dance, as well as having the music existing in reality of rehearsals or recording studios and so forth. A wonderful British actor called John O'Davies is playing Robbie. He was amazing. Alison Steadman is in it. Oh God, don't let me forget his name. He's in Inside Number 9. Peter. I'm blanking. I can't blank on him because he's my favorite. I'm going to have to Google him because I can't.
No, that's quite all right. Don't worry. I get what I call a brain fart all the time. And I had a terrible one in an interview once where I got the role completely wrong.
Well, Steve Pemberton. I don't even know why I said Peter. Steve Pemberton plays Robbie's dad, who I was such a fan of from Inside Number 9. And I was so excited that he was going to be on this film. But anyway, it's I think people are going to really like it. I'm sure a lot of people watching or listening to this might be like, a biopic about Robbie Williams? Why?
Well, I mean, and he's playing himself as well. He's playing himself, which is
he's not really playing himself. This actor John O'Davies is playing him. He does have some involvement. I think perhaps there are some concert footage that is going to use him, but I'm not entirely sure what they've used. The whole thing is a bit of a mystery because there's this whole other CGI aspect to it as well. All I can say is I think it's going to be really good. The music works amazingly, and I think it's going to be a big hit. But we'll see.
Might have to have you come back on the show when that comes out.
Sure thing.
Fantastic. Northern English Bastard. Interesting name. Thank you for representing people with 4 kidneys. I believe that's a justified.
That is a justified reference.
As we wrap up, what else can people look out for that you got coming up apart from the Robbie Williams thing? And is there anything or anyone you would like to give a plug to, including waving to your mum or but anything you like to mention?
They'll be in bed in Australia right now, but they'll probably watch this later. Hi, Ben. Actually, I think my friend Ben is watching this. How you doing right now?
Welcome to the show, Ben.
Yes, what's coming out? I think so. Later in the year, there's an Australian film called How to Make Gravy, which is based on a song by Paul Kelly, who's a kind of Australia's Bob Dylan, essentially. That's going to be really cool. There's the film The Bike Riders, which is a new Jeff Nichols film. People may know Jeff Nichols from films like Mud and Take Shelter, Loving. So this is a film with Tom Hardy and Jodie Comer and Austin Butler that's coming out in, I believe, June.
I've worked with Tom, actually.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
I directed the 2 plays for his theatre company. So
wow. I really loved working with him. And everyone, actually. That's going to be a beautiful film. And then the only other thing I sort of did recently, I guess that's coming out is come out probably later in the year, is a film called Together, which was with an Australian, it was an Australian writer director, but it was with 2 Americans, Dave Franco and Alison Brie, who are a couple in real life, and that is going to be really cool. That's like a relationship dramedy / horror, and I think that's going to be awesome too. So, but in terms of something that's coming out soon, I guess Bike Riders is the next thing that'll be out there.
Fab. Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to seeing that. Once again, you torture building. So, wow, Damon. I mean, this has been great. I've rushed through because
I don't want you to rush. You can have another 5-10 minutes if you need it. I don't want you to have to rush.
Oh well, no. I mean, listen, it's great that an actor of your caliber has come and supported me on this channel because I've worked in the industry for a long time. I come at these things from a slightly different perspective, and I'm really interested in always talking to fellow creatives about the process, the particular different things that they enjoy. I didn't mention Battle Creek, which you got to work with Janet McTeer, I think, in that, who's
that's right,
a legend of an actress. Yeah, I know your career well, man.
You do. You're really picking out the. I was like, oh, that's right. I forgot about that one. That's about.
Well, if I identify an actor that I want to work with, I watch everything they do if I can. You played Detective Niblet in that one.
I did. Goodness me. It's 10 years ago now. Goodness.
She's another lady who, I always hear positive stories about people working with, and lots of friends have worked with her and so on. But you also did Vegas, where you played another hitman.
I did
with Michael Chiklis, who's one of my favorite actors. Michael Ironside, who I'm presently talking to about coming on here. He's responded to my communications, and it took a while for me to convince him I was legit, because I think he's recently had a bit of hassle. I just had fake James Brolin try to book me as well. He was fake.
Oh, he was fake.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. So you never know if you're talking to the real person until you see him on camera. And in 10 years' time, with the way AI is going, we won't even know then.
You won't. No, it's terrifying.
I mean, that's a good topic to end on. Apart from, did you enjoy working with Chiklis and Ironside?
Oh, yes, and Dennis Quaid was in Vegas as well. Actually.
He was.
I absolutely did. Yeah, that was a really fun. It was like set in the early 60s, late 50s, early 60s, and it was this
just after Vegas had been set up and sort of.
That's right. Yeah. And
the early days, Frank Sinatra
this kind of sort of sociopathic kind of quietly spoken hitman. That was a lot of fun, and that was, again, as it was just very exciting for me getting to work with people of that stature, and it was only really coming out of that period of where I'd started doing things like Justified, and that was leading to other opportunities like this.
It was a shame that didn't have the same success as something like Boardwalk Empire, because it was very similar in terms of quality, in terms of the acting caliber of talent involved. I could have quite happily watched 3 seasons of Vegas,
Right. Yeah.
But it's another single season show worth tracking down of Damon's, of the other 7 I've mentioned.
Another one that proves the curse.
Let's not mention that again. I don't want people thinking that. But yeah, AI. I mean, as an actor, obviously, you want your likeness, you want your image copyrighted now somehow. I would imagine in perpetuity, and of course, we had that was part of what the actor strike was all about. And I agree. I don't think people should be signing away the rights to their image and their voice for, like, a meager sum just because you've done one thing with a studio. They kind of that's a very weird way to interpret a contract, especially over someone's likeness.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I feel like as filmmakers, it's a technology that's going to really expand things for us, particularly independent filmmakers like myself, who often can't get resources for things. If I want my 20 shots of Dakotas with paratroopers jumping out, although I have already got those, but if I didn't have them, in 2 years, the AI will be good enough, probably not even that long, to create all of that stuff for me without me even leaving the house, which
it does
takes the fun out of it.
That there's obviously the part of me that wants this not to be a thing at all for filmmaking, and then there's the other part that's the realist who knows it's bound to happen at some point. I don't know when, but I don't know if it's going to get to a point where audiences are actually going to go and see things where they know that no one they're watching ever walked the planet, even if the even if the AI was so accurate that you could not tell the difference between real people and not. The very fact of knowing that no human being of flesh and blood ever said those words, I don't know if we want to watch that, but I might be wrong. People watch cartoons and they're not real, but I don't know. I feel like people are still going to like the idea that there are real human beings who, you know, if we watch a Meryl Streep performance, part of what we're moved by is the fact that we're seeing her be moved in that moment. And
yeah,
I don't know if we're going to be as moved knowing, you know, if we know that is just zeros and ones in a computer. But I might be wrong. I really don't know. But there's no doubt it's going to be a big part of the industry in the years to come.
I think it'll be more effectively used in computer games. I think computer games now, you've got the VR headset, and I think it'll literally be like Ready Player One, where people will be logging in to step into a reality that is so real, it's probably better than the one for some of them that they're living in outside of that. And to a degree, a lot of people that spend a lot of time online are already doing that.
Right.
If you think about it. So, you know, kind of, and I think the AI will take that a lot further for them. It'll be interesting to see where that all develops. This was a question I thought of to Penn to ask. Do you have a favorite genre of movies to watch or work on? Like Westerns, for example.
Yeah, to work on, not particularly. No, I mean, I probably am less interested in working on sci-fi and fantasy than I am in just standard drama and comedy or thriller or whatever. It's not totally my cup of tea. That's not to say I wouldn't do it. It's just not at the top of my list, because I feel like the characters in those genres tend to be more about just serving the story. They're less likely to be character driven, although not exclusively, I realize. Yeah, I think really probably dramas, comedies, thrillers, that kind of thing. In terms of what I watch, pretty much a bit of everything. You know, probably dramas again are probably what I'm most likely to watch, or a really good thriller as well. Will do it for me. And I love a good documentary as well. You know, documentary features are something I would go and see as well.
Yeah, we've got pretty similar tastes in that regard. Well, it has been 90 minutes now. I promised I wouldn't keep you past, and I know you're keen to sample that Mexican menu.
Absolutely, my mouth's watering now after that question.
All this talk of food. I just want to say thanks so much for coming on. I think you should have your agent or your manager reach out to the casting director of Doctor Who, because I think they would love to have you personally. If you look at the types of actors they've had in that show, you're of the caliber that they want. Trust me on that. I reckon they'll have you on there in the drop of a hat. So
I might just do that, and if it works out, I'll say this. Lance Nielsen made this happen.
Well, I think it would be down to your agent, but I'm pretty sure that they'd be up for it. And you know, I think also House of Dragon, which is the new Game of Thrones show. For me, the writing in that show is, even though it's a fantasy show, it's really strong writing.
Yeah.
And
Well, as I said, there are absolute exceptions to that, you know.
That'd be another show I could see you being on, in some armor and, you know, being some kind of sleazy advisor to the king. Although I know you want to get away from this. Let's make it a heroic knight on a horse instead. Well, Damon, this has been brilliant. I've really enjoyed this interview, mate.
Same. Thanks for having me.
Northern is saying he hopes you and Scott Ryan work together on something else. I could have easily done 2 more seasons. I appreciate that he probably wanted to go out on a high, and some shows do go on too long, but you know, I wanted to find out what happened to the daughter, you know, what happened to these other people.
Well, I think it's great that it's only 3 seasons, because it never got bad, and we don't know if it would. But I do think that he should do a movie. I think a movie would be awesome.
Yeah, a movie would be, before he finally decided to become a taxi driver in a kind of out in the middle of nowhere, to kind of, because that's kind of how the show ends.
Yeah,
I think there's definitely room for a movie, and I don't think movie should spend any time explaining who he is or anything like that. We should just go straight into whatever the story of the movie is, and probably your character. would be involved. Well, guys, thanks everyone for in the chat. Thanks for your questions and super chats. Damon, thanks so much for your time. Just want to mention to everybody, tomorrow we start doing a breakdown of the entire series of Band of Brothers, one of my favorite shows of all time. We're going through all the episodes, but we've also got the script for the original pilot, which was completely reshot. So we're going to be looking at that script on the show. I've also got the script for the episode that was abandoned, which was called Personal Effects, where they're trying to identify the body of a dead paratrooper. We've got that script, and we're going to be talking through it. So we're doing a whole episode about an episode you've never even seen. I've got one of the production team actually on the show with me. Got all the behind-the-scenes stills that no one's ever seen. So that's going to be really good. That's going to be every Sunday, either 8 or 8:30 from this Sunday onwards. So, Damon, if you get really bored while you're out there and you're stuck, you know there's something on Sunday night for you to watch if you're a fan of Band of Brothers. And I hope you'll come back sometime. If you could come back another time, that'd be great. But it's been...
Let's do it.
All right. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm going to cut to the end credit now, but don't forget to tell the people that you care about, you love them, and we'll see you all again real soon.